Alright, here's my first spoiler discussion for a movie for Justice League. I would have had this up earlier, but things happened in life. So I'm doing this video now. Now. See, I even gave the wrong symbol. I meant to point at you, but I did a thumbs up. See, confusion. But anyways, I wanted to talk about, the movie, with spoilers in depth. And I figured the best way to do that with a movie like this, because there's like 6 or 7 main characters, is just to go character by character and talk about some of the highlights, I think, for each of them. And maybe, yeah, a little bit about the end credit scenes, I guess, at the end. But let's get started. First character up is Superman. Oh, this movie had a lot of Superman in it. More than I think a lot of people were expecting. I think originally people were thinking that, Superman would be in it for a little bit or just for the last, third or act of the movie, the final fight. But he was in the movie a lot. Like, I think at the midway point on up. I thought it was spectacular. I think audiences responded to Superman really well in this movie. I mean, you might say duh, because this movie was about his resurrection, coming back from the dead. Of course he would stand out. But I mean, people in the audience, I think, really resonated with, responded to him. Because I know, like, in the theater that I went to, when I saw it the second time, there were people, like, clapping in the Superman scenes. Like, when he went back to the farm with Lois and reunited with Lois, and, she called his mother, and his mother came up to hug him. There was a lady in the audience clapping, when Martha and Superman reunited. And people also clapped when he showed up at the end to help them, assist them to fight Steppenwolf off. That got a lot of claps from multiple people in the audience too, because they were happy to see Superman show up. And I just think that Justice League was a very good movie for Superman, except for the whole, mustache removal effects that were terrible. But overall, I just think that this was a very good Superman-centric film. And my favorite scene in the movie was tied to him. It was the middle action sequence where he was resurrected and he kind of was loopy or whatever for a second, or confused, and was fighting the League. I thought that was an excellent scene. It was emotional, it was dramatic. It had all this dialogue between him and Batman and other people. It showed the team having to work together in unexpected ways, and I didn't see it coming when it did. I had in the back of my mind that it was going to happen, but I had forgotten about it until it came up on the movie when it did. I thought it was spectacular. It was ripped right from the pages of comic books, Both Marvel and DC do this, where the superheroes will have a misunderstanding and they'll start fighting each other, but then something will happen where, they calm down and they wind up being allies again. This was right from a classic comic book story, Justice League or anything. It could have been the Avengers, the X-Men, the Teen Titans. Stuff like this happens in those kinds of books all the time. I loved when, like, Wonder Woman lassoed Superman, saying, remember Kal-El, remember who you are. That was like a comic book page brought to life. I mean, how many times does Wonder Woman put her lasso around people to make them, like, know their true selves or get out of, like, brainwashing or something? And she used it on Superman in this movie, and it didn't work, or it didn't appear to work. I'll talk about that later. And I was like, this is just like reading a Justice League comic. It was wonderful. And when the Flash was running behind Superman, when Superman had, like, I think, like, he was grappling with Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Cyborg at the same time, and Flash was running up behind Superman to, I guess, get the drop on him from the back or something. And Superman looked because he could match him in super speed, and the Flash wasn't expecting that. That was amazing. And the Flash had that oh crap look on his face. Ezra Miller had a great look. It was slightly, I think, it wasn't just shock. I think the way Ezra Miller acted in that scene, it was also, like, kind of a goofy shock. But still, and Superman looked so angry when he turned around and pissed and irritated. And it just, Henry Cavill does, angry well. Like, that angry, like, fearsome look really well on his face. And I think it just emphasizes, how terrifying Superman would be when, he gets angry. Because a lot of times in comic books, and I think in some of his shows, Superman, he's a good guy and nice guy. And he usually holds back because he knows he's so much more powerful than most of the people he interacts with. And he's trying to have restraint so he won't hurt anyone. But yeah, just think about how dangerous he would be if he did let loose or get really angry and, lose his temper. And it was terrifying to see even other superheroes have to watch out for Superman. That's why I thought this scene was great. And I thought Henry Cavill's look, the delivery on his face, and Ezra Miller's delivery of, shock and also fear was just great. I mean, that was my favorite scene in the whole movie, personally. I just thought everybody, cast, crew, writing, directing, whatever, they all did a great job. His exchange with Batman, in that fight scene where he says, you know, you won't let me live, you won't let me die. I thought that was powerful, referencing, you know, the events of Batman v Superman when Batman almost tried to kill Superman and was going to kill him with the kryptonite until Lois intervened to save him. And that was also mirrored in this movie when Lois intervened in this fight to shock Superman back to help him remember who he was and calm him down. Seeing Lois did that for him. And I'm wondering, you know, they make it seem, and maybe it was, that Lois is the person who snapped him out of his stupor or whatever, his confusion after being resurrected. But I'm wondering if maybe she had an assist from Wonder Woman's lasso earlier in the movie. Because if you remember, Wonder Woman had already lassoed Superman to help him remember who he is, or try to remember who he was, and it didn't seem to work. But maybe that was the starting activation energy to help, and then Lois, you know, was like the 1-2 punch, so to speak, to help him. You know, those two shocks to his system made him remember who he was. I don't know, it could be me thinking too much and reading too much into things, but I don't know. I can't talk enough about how I love this scene and love Superman in it. And I thought it was curious and cool and interesting how Batman, you know, his secret weapon to shock Superman back to his senses, or maybe that was Alfred's idea or whatever, was to bring Lois back, you know, to that scene instead of like some kryptonite weapon. Because I guess, you know, this is our kinder, gentler Batman with remorse. And this brings me to my next character, Batman. We do have, like I said, a kinder, gentler Batman. You know, he could have easily, the Batman from Batman v Superman would have had all this kryptonite stuff to toss at Superman to subdue and hurt him physically. Excuse me, it's a cold. But instead, you know, he brings out Lois to try to use, I guess, the high-minded approach or tactic. And it did work. And I think this definitely highlights the fact that Batman, I think it was his idea to bring Superman back from the dead in this movie. No one was even thinking of doing that until Batman did it. I mean, the other team members are the ones who helped make it happen. You know, the Flash had to use his power to do it, to make it happen, but it was Batman's idea. I think Batman sees in this movie him bringing Superman back from the dead. Of course, it wasn't just, I mean, part of it is to use Superman as a weapon against Steppenwolf to help them in their fight. But I also think Batman kind of wants to make amends, or he wants to kind of redeem himself in his own guilt. Because I think Batman feels like crap for the way he treated Superman in the past in BVS, and he wants to make up for it. He's totally sorry for it. I don't know if he ever really said, "I'm sorry" in this movie. I don't remember if that line was in there. It could have been, but I forgot. But I feel like he was basically did everything he could to say it without saying it. I also think that because of the storyline in Justice League, it gives us an opportunity to see Batman in a different way than we usually see Batman in movies. Because being someone who has to assemble other superheroes together and who's kind of mentoring and financially bankrolling their activities, it kind of makes Batman, it takes Batman out of his loner kind of stance and makes him more of a team player. And we don't usually see that with Batman. I mean, of course, he works with Alfred and he has his Robins, but the only Robin we've seen is Dick Grayson in some classic Batman movies. You know, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. But for the most part, Batman, he's usually by himself, or he has other people like Alfred giving him support remotely from afar, like over like a comm system or something. And Justice League, you know, we see Batman having to work side by side with people as teammates and people who are more powerful than he is sometimes. Usually Batman's the alpha. And Justice League forces him to kind of have to coexist in a different relationship with, depending on who it is, with certain people. And I like that. And I think we'll see more of this side of Batman. I mean, we'll see all sides of Batman. But I think, you know, if they do more Batman movies where we have Nightwing and Batgirl and maybe Damian down the line in the DC universe the way it is right now, we're going to see Batman having to be more of a team member and less, you know, this lone alpha wolf. So I don't know whether some people don't like seeing Batman like that. It depends. But I thought it was, I'm not saying that I think this is better or worse than the way we normally see Batman, but it was something that I noticed. And it'll be interesting to see Batman in a different light than he's usually portrayed in movies. The next character I'll talk about is Wonder Woman, but I'll lead into her with Batman. I thought it was interesting, you know, the dialogue exchange he had with Wonder Woman in like that Star Labs compound where he told her, or was that Batman's own headquarters, one of his bases? I don't remember. but where she was telling him he had to let go of the past, and he flipped it on her and said, "You need to let go of the past too. You know, you've been pining over Steve Trevor for like 100 years, and you know, you've been in the shadows. You know, you're an inspiration of hope and stuff too, but nobody knows who you are. What have you been doing all this time?" And, you know, that elicited an emotional response from her where she shoved him against, you know, that structure, you know, behind him. But I thought that was interesting. You know, why has Wonder Woman, you know, why doesn't the world know, more people in the world know who Wonder Woman is if she's been in operation? You know, she saved those people in that museum or that bank, right, from those terrorists. And I'm sure that's not the first time Wonder Woman's done that. And, you know, I'm sure people have written news reports. I mean, any woman with superpowers who does that more than time over a period of several years, she's going to get out there, whether she wants to or not, especially in this day and age when people have cell phone cameras and stuff. Even before cell phone cameras, I mean, people would have been taking pictures. So it doesn't make sense that Wonder Woman would be like a secret hero, if that's what Batman was alluding to. But even if you believe that she, even if that suspension of disbelief that she has been a secret hero, why? You know, why has Wonder Woman spent this long taking a back seat or helping people, but then trying to retreat into hiding and not be out in the open? You know, what for? Why wouldn't she be as well known as a superhero as like Superman is? And I think Batman brought up an interesting point, and we do kind of see her evolution in this movie from being that to being more out in the spotlight. Because at the end of the movie, I think Wonder Woman's last scene, you know, she's outside somewhere and she has all these guys tied up in her lasso, forcing them to tell the truth. And these little kids come up to her and she's out in the open talking to them. I think that's supposed to show Wonder Woman embracing her status as like an outward symbol of hope and inspiration. And just a super saying, "I'm here, I'm a superhero." And that's more like she is in the comics too. If you read Wonder Woman comics, Wonder Woman's not really someone to hide her heroism. It's not pride necessarily. She just sees what's the point. I mean, be who you are and be out there. And since she's an Amazon superhero, she's like, why not, you know, why hide that? That's who I am. Also, one of the criticisms of Justice League has a lot of criticisms, but one of them is that a lot of the sexualized jokes are at her expense. You know, like there was that scene when the Flash falls on top of her and his face lands like in her chest, her boobs. And then there was some other scene, where Aquaman doesn't realize he's sitting on her lasso of truth and it compels him to say how beautiful and sexy he thinks she is. I thought those scenes were funny and harmless. I was laughing at those, and so were a lot of people in the audience. I know I heard after the fact that people were upset about that, and they felt that it took away from Wonder Woman's character, but I didn't think that at all. I thought Wonder Woman was still powerful and strong in spite of that. And I thought those jokes and those scenes were so harmless. Like, the writers and the directors could have really ramped it up and made it that it was degrading and stuff, but they didn't do that. And I didn't feel like Wonder Woman as a character suffered from it. Maybe it's because I'm a man and I'm desensitized to the sexualization of women in media, but I thought that was completely harmless. And I didn't feel like it hurt Wonder Woman's character at all. And I thought she was still fabulous in this movie, and I thought all the other members were still fabulous too, in spite of their, you know, possible attraction to her. You have all these good-looking people working together, like no one's ever going to get attracted to each other. I mean, I think to not have that at all ever, it would be unrealistic, you know? Like, we're just going to pretend people don't have, like, you know, loins and sex drives and stuff. I mean, that just, you know, I wasn't bothered by it. Next up, we have The Flash. Ezra Miller's Flash was very popular in Justice League. I liked him too. I liked all of them, but he was a standout character, fan favorite for a lot of them. Jeff Johns, the chief creative officer for DC, did say a little while ago that from test screenings and stuff, Ezra Miller's Flash was a standout character. And I can see why. His personality, they made him like the quirky, silly one, sort of kind of the group. Even though multiple members of the Justice League had their silly moments, Ezra Miller stood out. And I think the fact that he was the youngest of the group, and I think the tiniest, you know, gave him something that made him kind of a different vein. And he was also the most afraid of being a superhero and fighting these parademons and Steppenwolf, and he wasn't afraid to say so. And they used him to be a foil character and bounce off the other members, all of whom were like a lot more gung-ho or a lot more courageous about the fight. And so he was used to, I think, be kind of like an everyman kind of character. And I also think, they used him for a lot of the comic relief and the jokes. Most of them, not all of them, but for most of them. And I liked how sometimes I felt Ezra Miller and the directors maybe made him a bit too goofy and silly. Like they tried a bit too hard to make him the funny one of the group. That sometimes it just came off as them overdoing it. But still, he was cool. He was a breath of fresh air. And this movie does have a lot of his origin in it. Of course, we don't know yet how he got his powers. I guess they'll explain in the Flashpoint movie, the first Flash movie that we'll get, how he gets his powers. But in this, at the end of this movie, he tells his father Henry Allen, who's in jail, that he got his first real job in like the Central City Crime Lab Department, CSI department, as like the entry level, first starting kind of job, which is important, integral to the history and evolution of the Flash, Barry Allen as a character, his career. So we are seeing him as the proto Flash, which I thought is interesting. And I did like my favorite part of the Flash, like I said, was that middle scene when he was running behind Superman and he had that oh crap look in his face. That was just awesome for both him and for Superman. It was just a great, visual exchange between the two, between their eyes, the eye contact. It was fantastic. And I think that the future could be bright for Ezra Miller as the Flash in the DCEU if they make a Flashpoint movie. I know I read reports that the existence of a Flashpoint movie depends on how successful Justice League is. And Justice League didn't have a very good opening weekend domestically in the US. So I don't know. Its international box office is really good. So we'll see what its, hold and drop off is and how much money it makes overall. I think if it makes in the 7 to 800s, it could do pretty well. And I think it's pretty much guaranteed to make at least the 700 millions. So we'll probably see a lot more Ezra Miller as the Flash going forward. But at the end of the movie when he's running, it looks like he's running funny. I know he got injured in that middle fight in the tunnel, but it seemed like he was healed by the time they fought Steppenwolf at the end of the movie, the final battle. So I wasn't sure why he was like wobbling in that final running scene. I'm wondering, was that an editorial like script gaffe? Like he was injured before and then they forgot that he was injured in the final fight, and then they remembered he was injured again when he did that final run in his last scene in the movie, because it's like he was wobbling on his legs, which I thought looked funny. But whatever. Anyways, I still give him the thumbs up. I like the character and I liked Ezra Miller's portrayal of him. It was cool. It was good stuff. Now we have Aquaman. I felt Aquaman was cool, but I felt that the way Aquaman was at the beginning of the movie was different than how he was portrayed near the end. Like in that first scene when he was talking with when Bruce Wayne goes to try to recruit him, and he rebuffs Bruce Wayne and at first he's standoffish and abrasive, but then he, starts talking to Bruce Wayne and they're, walking outside of that lighthouse or whatever, or wherever that is. But then, he still swims off and leaves Bruce Wayne, on the shore, turning him down basically. Aquaman in the beginning was very gruff, off-putting, like I want to be alone, don't talk to me, don't bother me. And that was his personality, his exterior. But by the end of the movie, he was, I think, kind of goofy. And, I don't know, he just seemed like kind of a different person. And I'm thinking that might be because of the Joss Whedon rewrites and directing. The director changed. They might have done that to change his character a bit, to, I guess, lighten him up. But, I guess I shouldn't be so quick to say that it seems strange or unrealistic, because people can act differently depending on whom they're around. Like, Aquaman was first meeting a stranger, Bruce Wayne, to him, and I guess for a lot of people, when you're first meeting someone you don't know, you can be off-putting and, guarded. But then as you get to know someone, you can change, and when you're around other people in a different environment, you can loosen up and be a jokester. No one is the same all the time. It depends on whom you're around in your environment. So, I get that. So I'm willing to give the directors and writers a pass for Aquaman in that respect. I do think that as the movie got, farther along, he kind of got lost in the crowd and didn't stand up that much. I felt Aquaman's strongest moments were in the beginning of the movie. But that's fine. I mean, it's a 2-hour movie with like 6 heroes. As long as in some portions they have, standout moments, that's cool. It doesn't have to be throughout all the time. I felt that Aquaman, his best moments were earlier. And then later on, he just kind of was just another person in the crowd. But, he was still cool. I liked his trident effect when he helped them in the tunnel fight when or the fork or whatever it was in the trident, but when he hit the ground with it and the energy made the water push back. It's cool that Aquaman has all these underwater weapons and accessories and tools to give him more powers or make him more formidable. And I also liked his underwater in the middle when Steppenwolf came to get the mother box from Atlantis. When Aquaman and Mera were talking and Mera made this air bubble underwater, I thought that was a cool way for them to allow them to have dialogue, under the surface. But that does make me curious, in the Aquaman movie that comes out in December next year, there's going to be a lot more underwater scenes, right? So every time two Atlanteans are talking, are they going to need an air bubble? Because that's just going to make it weird. I hope that James Wan, the director, and the screenwriters find a way for the Atlanteans and people underwater to communicate that's a bit more seamless, talking through the water. Aquaman actually did tell Batman in this movie that the way that he talks to like fish or whatever it's the water that does the talking or something. So I'm thinking that's a clue as to how they'll do underwater communication in the Aquaman movie. I hope so, because they can't have people making air bubbles all the time. Like Aquaman, I felt that Cyborg's strongest character moments were earlier in the movie rather than later on. I felt that Cyborg kind of faded to the background a bit later in the last half of the movie, whereas he came off a lot more strongly in the earlier parts. His biggest, I think, moment where we get insight into his character was, or just, more emotional stuff from him, is when he's talking to his father, Silas Stone, in the beginning, and he has resentment or anger towards his father for turning him basically into a cyborg. But his father says, I did this because you were injured in an explosion, and I had to repair you, and the only way to do it was to, make you like almost a robot. And then Cyborg says, you didn't want them to see the monster. And then his father said, you're not a monster. And Cyborg says, how'd you know I was talking about you, basically? I mean, that was some cool, parent-child angst, I guess. But of course, he loves his father because when they went to rescue Silas Stone from Steppenwolf and the Parademons, Cyborg was right there to help his daddy. And I also felt that a good Cyborg scene was when he was talking with Wonder Woman. And he wasn't even in the scene. When he was talking to her via computer in Batman's lab or base, that was a nice scene. I think it shows just how powerful and important Cyborg's power set is to the world. I think Cyborg is going to become, if you think about it, someone who has the power to work with computers or interface any computer control technology is going to be almost a god in the world when technology becomes more a part of our lives. And then we have Steppenwolf. Oh, poor Steppenwolf. The critics have been dragging him through the mud ever since this movie came out. Weak villain, terrible villain. But look, here's the thing. I like Steppenwolf. I mean, I thought he was very formidable in the beginning of the movie when he was getting those mother boxes. Like, he whooped the Amazons, and he came off really well in that scene. Steppenwolf was like a tough customer when he came to Themyscira to get that box. And then when he was Atlantis, he was tough there too. He beat up all those Atlanteans, including Aquaman, to get the box from Atlantis. And then when he runs to the Justice League, then he starts getting beat up. But here's the thing. I mean, that's Steppenwolf's character, right? I mean, he came to Earth before thousands of years ago, and he was beaten up back then. So the guy already has a history of being a loser. But he's a loser that I like, right? Because, Steppenwolf ran into people who had superpowers like he has, right? And there were more of them than there were of him. It's just him and a bunch of flying bugs, right? So, he was beaten once. He comes back thousands of years later, and he's beaten again. And these people have Superman this time. I mean, the whole point of them recruiting Superman to fight Steppenwolf is because Superman's a living weapon of mass destruction, right? And he proved it in this movie because once he joined the fight against Steppenwolf, it was basically over. And, Steppenwolf had to fight all 6 members of the Justice League together at once. So, I think it's realistic. Every supervillain, sometimes you're going to be a powerful supervillain and sometimes you're going to be a bit weaker. And I look at Steppenwolf like this. Darkseid's the big boss, right? In a video game, if you were going to say this is a video game. And Steppenwolf's like a mid-boss, or the first boss, right? And the first boss and the mid-boss is usually hecka easy compared to the last one, right? So I'm giving him a pass. And I felt, him being, someone who gets beat up was a part of his character. I felt like I got insight into Steppenwolf's brain, right? That's why he was driven to come to Earth the second time. Because he already lost once. It's like, I gotta try again the second time, and he lost again. But oh well, too bad. And he's gonna be back, maybe souped up. Because at the end of the movie, when the parademons swarm on him, he gets Boom Tomb teleported back up to a ship or to Apocalypse. So he's not dead, so we might see him again. So if you were rooting for Steppenwolf to become more of a tough customer than he already was, maybe you will again. And speaking of the parademons swarming on him because they were... That doesn't make any sense. Because the parademons sense fear, right? But why would you program into them the possibility that they would turn on their own general? I mean, that's just going to make them an inefficient, weapon, right? Everybody gets scared in battle, or at least most people, at least sometimes, right? The brave people are just the ones who were able to hide it better. But, why even give them the opportunity to turn on their own army? That's a huge weakness that can be exploited. Like, if I was a geneticist on Apocalypse, or if I was working for Darkseid, I would put in them their brains where it would be impossible for them to turn that fear hunting on their own troops, only on the enemy. I hope that Darkseid makes that improvement, because that army needs it. And then we have the end credits characters, the standout ones, Lex Luthor and Deathstroke, right? Let's start with Lex Luthor. I know Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, a lot of people didn't really like him that much in BVS. They felt he was too, small and boyish and I guess wimpy, or not masculine enough to be the Lex Luthor that they know from the comics and the earlier movies and Superman the Animated Series, voiced by Clancy Brown, right? That was the voice actor. Cool, calm, collected, and very, masculine, very manly. Not so much, the quirky, nerdy little guy from BVS. Well, with the straggly hair, but here with the shaved head and his business suit, he definitely comes off as more approaching, I guess, the classic Lex Luthor that people are kind of wanting to see from the character. And I was down with that. I liked it a lot. I didn't have a problem with Lex Luthor in BVS. I felt I understood what Zack Snyder was going for with this casting and this reimagining of the character, but not a lot of people really saw that. And with this movie, I think they were trying to rectify that a bit by, giving him a shave, having him be bald, putting him on a nice yacht, with all these fancy trappings around him, and giving him a suit. He looks a lot more like a confident, more, I guess, adult, grown businessman. And I liked it. I know it probably might not be enough for some people, well, for a lot of people still, but I liked it. I liked seeing the new wardrobe and the change up. And last, but certainly not least, Deathstroke. People lit up in the audience like, ooh, it's Deathstroke when he walked onto the scene. They were like, it's getting serious now. And it is. And Joe Manganiello, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. When he took off his helmet and you could see all the dyed white hair, he looked really good. He looked just like Deathstroke in the comics, classic Deathstroke. Because, Deathstroke is an older man, but he has, a peak human or above human body, with reflexes, strength, speed. And he's a great assassin fighter, all that kind of stuff. And of course, I think they dyed, Joe Manganiello's hair. Because I know he's older, like in his 40s or whatever, but I don't think he's completely gray. Not naturally, unless he dyes his hair to look younger, but I don't think that he does. I think he's still got a lot of, darkness in his hair, but for the movie and to play Deathstroke, they dyed it up. And it looks good on him. And I'm curious to see where we're going to see Deathstroke next. Will it be in Justice League 2? Because in that end credits scene, it was like, Lex Luthor says to Deathstroke, we got to form a league of our own. And that means Legion of Doom or Injustice League or Secret Society, one of those names. But will it be in that movie or will it be in someone else's movie? I know Warner Brothers, they said they were going to make a Deathstroke movie. So maybe, I don't know if that'll be the next time we see Deathstroke or if he might pop up earlier in somebody else's film. But anyways, I thought Deathstroke was cool. A definite surprise. And he looked great. And that was a great scene. That was a very Zack Snyder-y scene. Just the cinematography, the way it was filmed. I'll bet that was the one that he did and that wasn't a Whedon reshoot. I could be wrong. Maybe Joss Whedon did reshoot that scene. But it looked very classic Zack Snyder to me. And I liked it. And, I guess with ending it there, I am excited for Justice League 2. I hope we get one. I know the movie didn't really blow anybody away at the U.S. box office, but like I said, the international box office was good, and maybe it'll have legs. I know Fantastic Beasts opened around this time, and it wound up in its theatrical run making like $800 million. So if Justice League can make $800 million, that's enough. That'll be in the 800s ballpark. That'll be a great number. And financially, that'll be enough for them to make a JL2. And I hope, I want one as a DC fan and as someone who loved Justice League, the movie. I want to see Justice League 2. And I can't wait. And that was my spoiler discussion of the Justice League movie. Thank you for watching. And of course, if you want to watch me talk more about DC movies and TV shows and all that good stuff, you can come right back to this channel. Please subscribe. Please like. Please do all that good stuff. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.